Welcome to the shade of economy of new reality. Most people think that a geopolitical clash is only about territories, strategy shifts, or movements of military assets. But while the masses are watching the daily news, a completely different system is operating right under their noses. It is a massive, cynical, and highly profitable business and marketplace. And today I'm gonna show you exactly how it works. My name is Blondi, and on the channel we dig past the official narratives to find out how the world really works. Today's topic might feel heavy, but it's absolutely essential to understand the reality, the mechanics of this shade of economy. When institutions that are supposed to protect us start treating human lives as commodity, ignorance is no longer an option. I spent hours analyzing classified insights, talking to insiders, and connecting the dots. So you do not have to. My goal is to give you a clear, unfiltered picture of the high-stake gamble happening right outside our doors. If you appreciate deep investigation and want to stay informed about the news, the hidden truth, please hit the like button right now. It helps this video to reach more people who need to wake up to this new reality. And do not forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell, of course. First, we're going to look at what's happening inside the public school system right now in Russia. Let's start with the foundation of any massive state machine. When a system faces a prolonged conflict and needs to optimize a massive budget, it usually looks for the cheapest labor available. But what if I told you Russia found a labor force that cost absolutely nothing? Right now, across Russia, public schools have been quietly reposed into supply hubs for the special operation for the war. This is not conspiracy theory, an isolated incident in a few rural towns. We're talking about highly organized, systemic exploitation of underage students. According to the latest data, at least 1,017 schools across 77 different regions in Russia are officially using kits to produce hardware, military assets during their regular classes. And these are just one of the examples report that their activities of social network to get praise from local administration. In the last academic year, the number of official reports about kids working for the events jumped significantly, and it keeps breaking new records today. This sudden surge is not just an example at all. Starting from September 2024 hours, technology and labor classes became strictly mandatory for all students across the nation. And instead of learning basic life skills of modern crafts, examples they really need, these children are functioning as completely free manufacturing line. The statistic reveals a very calculated significant geographic distribution. The highest concentration of these school labor camps is not in the wealthy capital cities, where parents have lawyers and connections. In Moscow, in St. Petersburg, you will barely find any school engaging in this heavy production. But in regions of Russia like Bashkortostan, Krasnodar, and Tatarstan, dozens of schools are operating like full-time factories. The system deliberately targets areas further from the center where families have far less leverage to protest. So what exactly are these children making during their school hours? Analysts have counted 57 different types of gear and supplies being manufactured right in the classrooms. They're producing nets, technical bracelets, trench candles, and specialized camouflage suits. Girls are sitting in sewing machines making thermal clothes and metal stretchers. In one region alone, students produce 700 packages of dry shower for field operators. In another town in Russia, Kiev sewed over 400 medical pillows and covers for hospital dealing with the aftermath of the escalation. Some schools have even won government grants to purchase industrial sewing equipment, permanently turning typical classrooms into production floors. But here is the absolute most cynical part of this entire scheme. Not only is the state getting labor for free, but is also forcing the parents to pay for materials. Teachers regularly ask families to bring in empty tin cans, purchase expensive fabrics, and supply synthetic fillings. In many cases, parents' committees collect their own money to buy fleece, wax, specialized cores for these projects. The government gets the final product, the kids do the heavy lifting, and the parents cover all the expenses out of their own pockets. It is a perfect cost-free business model for the authorities of Russia. Teachers in Russia even discuss these talks under fake academic titles, calling them ecological or social projects. You might ask, why do not the parents just pull their kids out of the specific classes? Because the system has designed this trap very carefully to avoid any resistance. Labor class is a mandatory part of the federal educational standard. If a student refuses to participate, it is treated as a direct violation of the academic curriculum. Teachers openly admit that they use these lessons to fulfill the state's quota for patriotic upbringing. When teenage girls express reluctance or refuse to sew military assets, the educational staff applies heavy psychological pressure. They conduct some explanatory talks, guilt trip the students, and force compliance through peer pressure. One teacher explained that when there were tears, dissatisfaction, they pushed through until girls surrendered to collective will. This is a profound violation of a personal boundaries disguised as a normal school project. The administration silenced dissenting parents by citing vague educational guidelines that are almost impossible to fight legally without risking your child's future. As a result, an entire generation is being conditioned to believe that their time, their energy, and their labor belong to the state for free. They're taught that their primary purpose is to supply the ongoing geopolitical clash. This shade of economy extracts maximum value from those who cannot defend themselves, but exploiting school children is just the lowest tier of this pyramid. Once these kids grow up, they may face a much more brutal reality in the adult world. And that brings us to the next level of a system where young freedom itself becomes a travel commodity. The entire system operates mostly for one simple reason. It relies heavily on silence and widespread ignorance. Right now in Russia, a predatory shadow economy is turning human lives into a high-stakes business. From the street of St. Petersburg to front lines of the conflict, all the way, people are being hunted not for their ideals, but for their bank accounts. You need to see how the system of exploitation actually works inside Russia today. This predatory behavior does not just stay in the borderlands, it acts like a virus, infecting major cities in Russia and creating a blueprint for extortion across the entire country. Let me talk about how marginalized communities, specifically LGBTQ individuals in Russia, have become a highly lucrative target for organized rackets. The scheme is brutally simple and effective. Exploiters use dating apps like Hornet or Telegram bots to set up what appears to be a normal meeting, normal date. But when the person arrives at the location in Russia City, they are not met by a date. Instead, they face a group of aggressive individuals. What follows is severe mistreatment, robbery, and intense psychological pressure. The attackers take away phone, demand bank transfers, or even force the person to apply for online microloans right on the spot. Some of these exploiters hide behind ideological excuses. They claim that they're protecting traditional values or hunting people they deem inappropriate for Russian society. But the reality is almost often purely economic. For example, one exploiter admitted in court that he set up these traps simply because he had lost all his money in casinos and sports betting. He needed to pay off his debts and specifically target his vulnerable group, LGBTQ, because he calculated they would be too terrified to report the incident to the authorities in Russia. In some cases, this high-stake gamble ends in absolute tragedy. Consider the story of Vlad, a 21-year-old accountant from St. Petersburg. He arranged to meet someone online late one evening. At 2 in the morning, he called his friends and colleagues, begging to borrow 15,000 rubles. Shortly after, he tragically lost his life under highly suspicious circumstances. Despite the obvious signs of a setup, Russian investigators dragged their feet. They blamed the young man, suggested he was just looking for extreme sports, and completely refused to open a formal investigation. But the most chilling part of this entire shade of economy is who is actually running it. Sometimes the predators are exact same people who are supposed to protect the public. In the city of Nalchik, a Russian police captain discovered that an applicant was a member of the LGBT community. Instead of fulfilling his duties, the officer threatened the man with extortion charges and extorted over 500,000 rubles from him. In Tomsk, a narcotics control officer created a fake profile on a dating app, collected sensitive personal photo of a local man, and then demanded 30,000 rubles to keep quiet. The system in Russia knows exactly what it is doing. It relies entirely on fear and silence to keep the profit margins high. Over the last 5 years, Russian courts have issued only 52 verdicts related to this specific setup. This is just a tiny fraction of the actual incidents happening every single day. Advocates note the reporting rates have plummeted because people in Russia know the system will not protect them. Recently, only 12% of those who face this mistreatment even bothered to contact the authorities. And even when they do find the courage to speak up, the Russian departments reject the applications and refuse to help nearly half the time. When the Russian state openly demonstrates a certain group of people like LGBTQ have no rights, it sends a clear signal to the exploiters. It creates a completely risk-free environment for making money off human suffering. But this system of exploitation does not stop at civilian level. It reaches its absolute peak right at the front line, when even Russian soldiers themselves become victims of their own leadership. What we are seeing across Russia is the total collapse of social contract. When the state decides that a certain group of people simply have no rights, it doesn't just create a vacuum, it creates a marketplace for cruelty. When a narcotic officer in Tomsk or a police captain in Nalchik become the predator, there is nothing left to talk. This environment in Russia has become a risk-free zone for extortionists, where the only thing more profitable than the law is the silence of its victims. Whether it's a young man in a city or a soldier at the front, the message from authorities is clear. You are on your own. The question is, how much longer can a society function when its own protectors are the only ones holding the ransom note? We're looking at the terrifying reality of the justice system in Russia. Forget everything what you know about courts and trials. We are exposing a secret economy when police officers are paid massive bounties to send people to the front lines. And later, we'll look at the horrifying Wild West in the borderlands when the system protects child predators. Trust me, you need to watch this video till the end. But before we dive in, make sure you like this video and subscribe to my channel for more deep dives. As we look closely at the shadow economy in Russia, we are moving away from public schools in my last videos and entering the local police departments. This is where the standard justice system has basically collapsed. It has transformed into a highly profitable commercial recruiting agency. In the past, when people broke the rules, they expected a normal process, an investigation, a fair trial, and a legal procedure. But in this reality, people in legal trouble are no longer treated as suspects. They are viewed as highly liquid assets that can be immediately cashed out. Since the spring of 2024, the rules in Russia have changed dramatically. Now, Whenever someone between the ages of 18 and 65 is brought into custody, the very first thing that happens is a mandatory sales pitch. Before any real questioning begins, police officers must offer a detainee a direct ticket to the Special Operations Zone, the war zone. They are promised massive sign-on bonuses, salaries exceeding 200,000 rubles a month, and some bonuses for family. They completely bypass the course and avoid any further investigation. But there is a much darker layer to this deal. The victims of these crimes are completely abandoned by the state. Any civil claims for the compensation are pushed aside until the end of the conflict, and that is only if the recruit actually survives. As one legal expert stated, under this new system, the authorities in Russia absolutely do not care about the victims. So why the police officers so eager to push these people into the military? Is simple. They are beating pay heavy bounties for every single person they successfully recruit. The authorities have implemented a reward system that pays officers anywhere from 10,000 rubles to 100,000 rubles for each signature secure military contract. The prices vary heavily depending on the region. In St. Petersburg, sending someone to the front lines earns an officer 50,000 rubles. In the surrounding Leningrad region, the bounty doubles up to 100,000 rubles. In Moscow, the going rate is also around 50,000 per head. For a local detective whose official monthly salary might be around 40,000, this is a financial temptation. It can just double or triple their income by sending just someone to war. When this much money is involved, ethical boundaries completely dissolve. Officers openly admit to use the system to clean up their local statistic and get rid of anti-social elements in their neighborhoods. And this aggressive tactic is incredibly effective. According to internal data from June 2025, officers across Russia offered this deal to more than 3,000 individuals. Nearly 12% of them agreed on the spot. Most were caught stealing, while others were involved with illegal substances. But because officers have strict quotas to meet, the persuasion tactics often cross the line into severe mistreatment. In the Voronezh region, 3 officers detained a young man for a minor violation and tortured him with electrical devices for hours to force him to sign up a military contract. The officers face zero immediate consequences. This proves that the system protects its top earners, no matter how brutal their methods are. Sometimes the process ignores all logic. Police grab people who are heavily intoxicated and drag them straight to medical commissions. When the military tried to demand the bounty money back, the police fought them to keep the cash. It is a terrifying bureaucratic fight over human collateral. While some officers refer to these payouts as dirty money, the majority have simply adapted. They no longer investigate or seek justice. They evaluate every person who walks into the station based on their market value. But this complete lack of accountability does not stay confined to the police station. It spills out into streets, creating a zone of absolute impunity. This is exactly what the men in uniform call the territories near the conflict zones, like, for example, Zaporizhzhia region. The prime targets in this lawless environment are local teenage girls. These men who feel completely immune to prosecution use dating apps and Telegram bots like DaVinci to find targets. They openly admit they do not care whether the person on the other side of the screen is an adult or a minor. Why are these young girls interacting with them? It comes down to basic economics. Many local families in this region live in extreme poverty, surviving on barely 30,000 rubles a month. Suddenly, these men appear with massive state payouts, earning around 200,000 rubles a month. For a teenage, these men represent a quick ticket out of the poverty. The soldiers buy them expensive smartphone, gifts, waves, and energy drinks to gain their trust. But this is nothing more than a carefully designed trap. Let me tell you about a documented incident. A 14-year-old girl named Alina and her friend Rita were walking in their village when two men in a car invited them for a ride. They drove the teenagers to an abandoned plot. What happened next was a severe violation. Alina was subjected to extreme mistreatment. Just a week later, her friend Rita faced the exact same ordeal with the same individual. Where is the local police? Where are the child protection services? They are completely paralyzed. Local inspectors admit they cannot even visit these families because of constant joint activities. The civil authorities are too scared to intervene. Once, military insider explicitly stated the local women have zero credibility in this system. He bragged that even if a victim writes an official statement, absolutely nothing will happen to the attacker. All legal issues are quietly swept under the rug by commanders and military police. It's a closed ecosystem of mutual protection. Even when mothers demand justice, the system protects its own. The men involved with Alina and Rita were experienced officers with 20 years of service. When questioned, they shifted the blame onto teenagers, claiming the girls were provocative and lied about their age. This is the ultimate tragedy of the shade of economy. It allows men with power and money to exploit the economic situation and desperation of children and protect them from any consequences. The authorities pretend to investigate, but in reality, they pretend they were deceived and the victims are left traumatized and silenced. The sense of absolute impunity acts like a virus. It infects the entire society, creating a blueprint for extortion, mistreatment that could eventually reach your own neighborhood. What do you think about current situation in Russia? Text me down below your opinion and see you in my next video. Don't forget to subscribe.